How did you do that with the background?
Welcome to Seen and Heard podcast, where everyone should be seen and heard. Welcome my co-hosts tonight, Chrissy and Charles. Hello, everyone. We're starting late for March. Today is March
I'm frozen.
3rd. Nope, we see you. You're fine. I'm going to open up tonight's show with a video from Joyanne Reed, and then all of us, we're going to talk and discuss on the other side of this video.
A Republican in Florida state legislature has filed a bill that, if enacted, would eliminate the Florida Democratic Party. No, I'm serious. The Ultimate Cancel Act, and that is the bill's real name, would cancel the filings of party that previously advocated for slavery, which the Democratic Party did more than 150 years ago. It's a performative move, toxic and deceptive, but it also serves as an opportunity to examine the fascinating story of our two major political parties. Now, usually I don't do this because Black History is over, but want to hear it? Here it goes. Back in the day, we're talking way back, the mid-19th century, the Republicans were indeed the anti-slavery party. It was the Democrats of the South who wanted to preserve slavery and who opposed Republican Reconstruction legislation. It may sound a little disorienting, but basically the Republicans were the liberals, while Democrats were the staunch conservatives who wanted to remain slaveholders forever. As you can imagine, once the Civil War was over and the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments gave Black men the right to vote, at least on paper, voters preferred and importantly voted essentially unanimously for the Republican Party. But over time, the parties flipped ideologies. They literally switched brands. It happened for many different reasons and took decades to complete. But in very simplistic terms, the Democrats, who remember were the conservatives, began to act over their party's increasingly pro-civil rights platform. The shift was gradual, but punctuated by 20th century Democratic presidents. Franklin D. Roosevelt, who dramatically transformed the Democratic Party by launching the New Deal after the Great Depression. His successor, Harry Truman, who pushed to desegregate the military after World War II. John F. Kennedy, who shifted on civil rights after a series of violent attempts to integrate Southern universities. And Lyndon Baines Johnson, who signed the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts, breaking the parties with Southern conservatism, the Dixiecrats, and white supremacy. By the time Ronald Reagan became president in 1980, conservatism was the prevailing ideology of the Republican Party, meaning modern-day Republicans are nowhere near what they were 150 years ago or even 50 years ago. But even with all this history in mind, there is another thing. Do not let today's Republicans trick you into thinking the pre-20th century Republican Party was free of racism. Remember, it was the Republicans back in the old days who were anti-slavery. So following emancipation, the party consisted of both white and Black Americans. They literally called themselves Black and Tans. As the 1800s ended, some of those white Republicans weren't too happy about the gains made by their Black counterparts and wanted to eliminate them. The white movement emerged in the Republican Party as an organized effort to drive Black folks out of party leadership. At the same time, Black Americans were moving north in the Great Migration, and their votes were being courted by big city Democrats. This happened in the waning days of Reconstruction when it began, which means white racist republicanism predates the 1960s. Racism is a complicated after all. The true story about our political parties, it is the stuff today's Republicans don't want you to learn. It's how they continue to lie and to gaslight and co-opt the abolitionist legacy of Abraham Lincoln. Which is why this bill in Florida to cancel the modern-day Democrat Party because Southern Democrats advocated for slavery during the Civil War is both dumb and anti-historical. It's also dangerous. If Florida Republicans had it their way with this bill, millions of Democrat voters would be notified that their party exists. It would automatically change their voter registration to no party affiliation. Essentially, it's the legislative version of DeSantis's election police, disenfranchising mainly voters of color who would no longer be able to vote in the state's closed primaries. Even worse, this isn't the only message bill Republicans are cooking up to excite their base and own the libs. Florida is moving to expand the Don't Say Gay law, this time waging a war against pronouns.
Thoughts?
I've been seeing memes on Facebook. If they really care, they say, "Oh, wage this war against pronouns," as she said, right? Go ahead and use she to mention God or Jesus, and the Republicans will absolutely freak out, right?
Okay, I was trying to fix this for our other. So, what are your thoughts on how fast these Republicans are moving to put in these legislations all over the country, and the Democrats being MIA?
Well, I think the Democrats are, the forestry department at one point they had this new policy of let it burn, right? Because they had been putting out forest fires for so long that the fuel had built up, and that the health of the forest does require some burning. That's part of how forests replenish themselves, and I think that's what the Democrats are doing. Like let them burn to the ground. Let them shoot themselves in the foot. For example, I think strategically and behind closed doors, I think they're glad that Republicans succeeded in finally getting their multi-decade plan to get rid of Roe v. Wade. I think they're secretly glad because, like you were mentioning before, Sharron, the fundraising went off the hook at that point. They started contacting everyone and their mom. Send donations now because we're the, well, you didn't do anything before to stop. What now all of a sudden, because you could say, look at the big bad wolf over there. So I think it's good for them, and I think they realize it's good for them. I'm actually surprised it succeeded because I too used to think the same thing. I used to say Republicans purely use it as a culture war symbol, but the last thing they want is to actually succeed in getting Roe v. Wade, because that's going to affect their own daughters, and it's gonna blow up in their face. They're going to be associated with getting rid of Roe v. Wade, and it's going to make them horribly unpopular forever, and it's going to backfire on them. I think they accidentally succeeded, to be honest. I don't think they truly wanted to succeed, but I think the fringe elements actually believed in the cause. It's Frankenstein's monster, right? Dr. Frankenstein created a monster to protect the community, and he ends up turning on them, because when you create a monster, it comes back and it destroys you as well. That's what they say about our intelligence community, right? When you create a military industrial complex and you create spies and saboteurs and such, eventually, as Malcolm X said, the chickens come home to roost. Look, you spread war abroad, that stuff is going to come back to you and haunt you, right? Because he did say chickens come home to roost. Is that what he said?
What was Malcolm X?
Yeah.
Something kind of that was like paraphrasing what he said.
Or
was it?
Was it? I think it was chickens, or it wasn't pigeons. I think it was chickens come home to
Let me
roost.
see.
And yeah, I think it was. Anyway, and you remember when he said that was they say, hey, Malcolm X, what's your thoughts on the assassination of JFK? He's like, hey, chickens come home to roost. And of course, everyone flipped out, which to this day is the funniest thing ever.
Okay,
how many people did JFK try to assassinate?
That was paraphrased. It's, the title is paraphrased from a comment made by Malcolm X in reaction to the murder of President Kennedy in '63. He said, the killing was merely a case of chickens coming home to roost, in direct defiance of an order from Elijah Muhammad not to comment on the matter during its immediate aftermath.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. That, that's how I remember it too. He was like, that's just a case of chickens coming home to roost. So that's what happened with 9/11. Those were our assets that came in and enacted that operation. Al Qaeda, we created that. Uh, um, 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 Saddam Hussein, we created that. Saddam Hussein has been a CIA agent since the 50s, the 1950s. You look at George H.W. Bush, he invaded Panama. Well, who was Noriega? A CIA agent. So these are chickens coming home to roost. This is when you create Frankenstein's monster and it comes back to haunt you. So I think that's what they did they unleashed this culture war and they accidentally succeeded. And now it's come to bite them in the ass. Now their mothers, their daughters, their sisters, they're all going to suffer because let's remember these abortion clinics are not just abortion. They were for it's for comprehensive prenatal care. I mean, you're gonna cause more death of and associated with women's health. You're gonna have an increase of cervical cancer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, it's not just about abortion. Do you hate the female anatomy? And I think that's what it comes down to is that being a Protestant country, I think there's a deep visceral hatred of women, especially the birth canal. I mean, that's where it really comes down to an irrational hatred of women. So so it's an irrational hatred of women, and in this case, we're also looking at the irrational hatred of Black people, the irrational hatred of Jews, because they're associated with the Democratic Party. Immigrants, these are all the major components of the Democratic Populist Party, for better or for worse. I'm not making any excuses for the Democratic Party, but I think that they have a visceral hatred for this grouping of others, and ultimately, as a reactionary party. So when we call them fascists, it's not name calling. What it is, it's a very specific identification of characteristics. How do we characterize fascists? If you took these people who are like, ban the Democratic Party, like she was saying, let's own the libs. If you really sat them down and got real honest with themselves and say, what should we do with these people? They would say, line them up on a wall and shoot them. This is fascism. They genuinely want to just be rid of these damn people. They're murderous. They're not open to conversation. They are not a part of democratic, open, conversations. So they are an extremely dangerous element in society. And then we come up against the paradox of an open society. If you're familiar with Karl Popper, after World War II, he was chased out of Germany in the 30s. He went to, I think, Australia or something, and talked about right. So we've got the reinstitution of Jim Crow. So this is all the stuff that's going on in the South is just it. In other words, it becomes confusing to us when we take each of these multi-pronged approach to shut down freedom, and we look at the Republican Party. They seem clownish and buffoonish. But if we understand, it all comes down to they are enemies of freedom. They are fascists. They live in fear. They're in their reptilian brain. Their prefrontal cortex is shut down. It's not about logic, evidence, rationality, anything like that. It's purely about fear, hatred of the other, suppression. I don't want to think, just shut it all down. And when it comes back to bite them, they're just going to be very confused. And I know I went on a very long rant, but I think it's just, go ahead.
Let's hear from Chrissy real quick, and then I'm going to play this video, and then we're going to talk on the other side of this video as well.
I would have to agree with what Charles said. I mean, I can't go that far back into history, to quote stuff, but it's kind of like what I was saying at some points to you, like in our own little conversations, probably not as eloquently said as Charles, but like when you ask like with Democratic Party, I'm like, one, they're only doing but so much as they can. And ultimately, in terms of it, like I was saying, like let it bite them in the butt, basically, like he said, but he said it much more smoothly, nice, eloquently, but it's true.
Do you feel like, okay, so you're a older millennial, right?
Okay.
So how do you feel like the Democratic Party, or how do you feel your generation should react to all of this? I mean, do you feel like you're losing out? Like the of course the older generation has kind of messed up everything for everybody, but in case of my generation, we were kind of like the middle child, and nobody really listened to us when we were trying to
Mhm.
change things. So we were kind of like the middle child. But your generation is after me. So how do you think
Well, I
yours?
mean, obviously, right now, like you were talking about the Roe v. Wade and all of that stuff, that's going to affect my generation more because we are, especially us females, we're in that childbearing age, you know. So, and for those who may get pregnant, be it they were raped or whatever the case may have been, or they're carrying a fetus that the doctors are telling them is going to come out with X, Y, and Z, and is not going to make it past whatever, or it's going to be like, though they're taking away the option for us to go and have abortions, like he said, policing our bodies. This is our bodies. How are you, a man, making rules, or majority men making rules policing our body?
Mhm.
um so I mean,
And also the fact that the abortion clinics are not just for abortions, like he said.
exactly, yeah, for a lot of people who may not have that health insurance or whatever, they were able to go to those clinics for, like he said, prenatal care.
Mm.
But I mean, when it happens
especially
to
for
you,
low income too.
yeah,
Mhm.
that,
You know,
yeah.
rich women are going to be able to get abortions. Rich women can get prenatal care, but for very poor immigrant, abortion clinics were the only way for them to get that kind of prenatal care. And what do you call those? The prenatal vitamins or whatever. They're a certain kind
Mhm.
of vitamin, especially vitamin B, which is like folic acid is
Mhm.
terribly important to prevent birth defects, things like that. And the other thing too is uh, ADD. I forgot what I was going to say. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, so with what you were saying there, Charles, I have a question for you. So you mentioned that you wanted to have kids. So how do you think with these, especially Roe v. Wade being overturned, how do you think that's going to affect your chances of meeting a woman and maybe possibly having kids? Because now she's scared. The women are scared, which
Yeah, no,
rightfully
women
so.
women are scared, and the other thing too is it's not just the places where it's been banned. It's putting pressure on other states who aren't
Mhm.
banning it to shorten the time period where you can get an abortion. And now it's reached the point where even places that technically on the map aren't, penciled in red because they haven't banned it, but they've made the period so short that it's not within the range of a woman even knowing she's pregnant. So
Right.
that it's like this quasi abortion ban
Mhm.
where it's like I only just found out I'm pregnant. Now I have till Thursday to get the abortion. Like, no, it's not going to work.
Mhm.
So it's more comprehensive than that. So and
Eh,
and also the really big dirty secret about abortion is there's a book written, and then they made a documentary with the authors of the book. It was really popular like 30 years ago. It's called Super Economics, where these economists went in and they used their kind of statistical methods to answer much bigger social questions. And one of the big questions that they answered was, why is it that right at, I can't remember the date, it was like 1997 or something like that, there was just this suddenly crime fell off a cliff. I mean, crime was like this, and then suddenly that year it just plummeted, and it's never recovered since. Which is goes to show you the hypocrisy of all this get tough on crime and blah 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 stuff that both Democrats and Republicans participated in is a big lie because crime has fallen precipitously and has never and will never recover. And so they crunched all the numbers. How much of a percentage of reduction in crime is, raising the minimum wage? Okay, it's this much percentage. How much is it putting more police on them? Okay, it's this much percentage. How much is it is legislation? This much. And they crunched all the numbers, and they were like, the biggest decrease in crime still is unaccounted for. And they said, okay, Well, let's do this math. Uh, that year that it fell off the cliff, crime rates, it was exactly 18 years after Roe v. Wade. You didn't
Mm.
have an entire generation of unwanted children being born. And that's the dirty little secret of abortion, is that you don't have this whole, swath, this ocean of unwanted youth that are out running amok. And that's why we call it family planning. It sounds like an obscene kind of word salad, but when you're able to plan your families instead of just being forced to have all these
Mhm.
children you can't care for, then it's an overall knock-on positive effect to the rest of society. This is just a level of analysis that's just absent from Republican. They don't want to talk about these things. They're not comfortable to talk about anyway, um, and we
Well,
just
of course,
don't expect that
that's why
level
there's
of
everything else out there,
right.
because they want to cover up that, because that perspective I haven't heard to this point.
Mhm.
I've heard everybody else's perspectives, like especially like about the workforce, because there's a decline in the workforce for rich people. They need all these bodies to make money from,
Yeah,
and so especially like with Christy, your generation. So the men and women of Chrissy's generation are trying to be responsible, like you said, family planning. We cannot afford kids. This is I'm not speaking as a millennial, but from what I've seen of her generation, they can't afford kids. That's very responsible. We don't want to have kids that we can't afford. We could barely afford ourselves. The rent's going up, groceries are going up. We can't afford anything. So why are they trying to force us to have kids we can't afford?
Only for us to then say, oh, now I'm stuck with this child that I can't afford. One, either you put them in the system, or if you decide to keep the child because you don't believe in putting them in the system because they get lost in translation and run away and things that I see all the time. So you keep this child and you try your best, but now you go on public assistance. And now it's like, oh, well, we're paying our money. So now they could throw that at you. Oh, you're getting our government money to raise your child. Well, if you would have let me have my abortion when I wanted it because I knew I wasn't financially ready, I maybe have had a 5-year goal that I could have completed and then had kids because I know my money would have been right. I was trying to invest. Maybe I was trying to invest or starting to invest money to whatever. And now this kid is delaying all of that, turning things around, whatever the case may be. You don't know why somebody chooses to put it off, if at all. So,
yeah. It's also oppressive to poor people because uh, poor people are the ones more likely to be burdened by one extra child, right? Another family could afford an extra child, but a poorer family. And what's important is, for example, let's take the example of teenage pregnancy. If you look at the statistics, the age at which you have a child is a huge determiner of poverty for that young mother, right? So every single year you can delay having a child up until, I don't know, the age of like 21 or something like that. After that, it plateaus. But during those key early years, the earlier you have the child, the more of a determinor it will be in dictating your policy, your poverty. Why? Because all these white women who were able to get abortions or whatever, uh, they went on to high school and college and everything. But if you're 16 and you have a kid, next thing you know, you're working already. You don't got time for high school and college. I'm not saying they don't, but Black women are, like, I think, the most educated population. Um, um, but I think, again, that also has to do with the fact that as working professionals, that they do decide, as they're working, they go back to school and continue to get degree upon degree upon degree, right? Just because it helps your earning potential. But I think that's something that comes after the fact. But again, when you're having your wealth sapped from an early age as opposed to building wealth, that's where so you've got two disparities. We talk about the income disparity between Black and white. Let's also talk about the wealth disparity, right? The wealth disparity is even those of the same economic bracket between black and white, there's a disparity in wealth. What does wealth look like? Assets, safety network, etc. So, for example, two identical black and white individuals in the same income bracket, if they lose their job, white people have assets, family, a safety net that they can fall back on, whereas black families have less of that wealth. And wealth, I mean, in the comprehensive way. So, see, social issues are complex. You can't just brush it over with let's just ban it. So it's just very embarrassing. But we have a very terrorized public that are deeply propagandized. And one thing that if you look back in history, one thing that has always worked is to turn working people against each other along racial lines. What she was talking about with the lily white Republicans. Look at the labor movement. Once again, the way they crushed the labor movement was to pit black and white workers against each other, etc. So this is
the model minority myth.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So they always get working people and marginalized groups to fight to be pitted against each other in order to prevent cohesion. Like you look at the early slave rebellion, whiskey rebellion, etc. They were all black and white. They were slaves, runaway slaves, free blacks, and poor whites.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, another rant. Sorry, but go ahead.
No. That was relevant. And then like what we were talking about earlier, Chrissy, about how I was frustrated because people see what needs to be done, but everybody is so distracted and so split apart, like what he was saying, that I'm looking for like one particular, a group that's actually trying to organize so that we could all together, fight what's going on. Because we're going to wake up one day, it's just going to be like, I mean, every day that we're waking up right now, you see what this mess is that's going on. I'm going to play this video real quick, and then we're going to talk on the other side of this video.
Eyebrows for some and creating full-blown outrage for others after the Republican-led State House passed a bill that would form a court system of unelected judges and prosecutors to preside over part of the capital city of Jackson and expand the Capitol Police Force. In short, instead of giving the city's majority black residents an opportunity to exercise their voting rights to elect judges and prosecutors, the power would fall to government officials. Joining us now is one of the biggest opponents of this legislation, Mississippi House Minority Leader Representative Robert L. Johnson III. Representative, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start by reading part of your joint statement about these bills. You say HB 1020 and SB 2889 are an insult and a distraction, taking power away from our capital city while we waste critical hours sitting around and letting hospitals close and our people die. You go on to say these bills are what modern-day Jim Crow looks like. Explain to us how this bill even this far along in the process to begin with.
Well, we have a supermajority-led House and Senate, a Republican governor. And as I describe them from time to time, they are kind of new to this process, and they don't have respect for the rules, procedure, or the tradition of the legislature. And so we don't even, there are even opportunities to debate some of these issues. They've just decided that they're just going to run roughshod over the whole process and have what they want.
All right, so just break it down for us in layman terms. If this were to pass, what would this mean for the black residents?
Well, they would essentially have judges who would be appointed by a Supreme Court justice who was appointed by this very governor that is engineering this effort. They wouldn't have any say-so in that judgeship, those multiple judgeships. And so those people would answer to no one who lives in Hinds County. Not only would that judge not be elected, that judge could come from anywhere in the state. And so that the Constitution says all of our judges should be elected, shall be elected. And so this takes that right to vote, that right to exercise their constitutional power from the people in the city of Jackson. So all the cases I mean, it would be the most important part of this. So all the cases that anybody brings against the state of Mississippi, and we bring them all the time. A lawyer, if you sue the state of Mississippi, they have to come through the circuit or chancery court in Hinds County. There was a time when we were fighting for more money for public education. And one of the things that they wanted to challenge was the constitutionality of the referendum proposal. One of the white Republican legislators told his constituents, if we pass this referendum, then you'll have to answer to a black judge in Hinds County. That, you know, there are these little phrases, these invites that they have that always point to race.
Is there a chance that this bill will die in the Senate?
There is a chance the bill will die in the Senate. Thankfully, because of the uproar, because of the push that us have had from lawyers to community activists to legislators, I think, and the national pressure from people like just the exposure from networks, from people like you, they are feeling the pressure. This does look like Jim Crow, like post-Reconstruction. This looks like everything that some of us who are old enough remember growing up through the Civil Rights Movement, the things that we fought to reverse.
Representative, curious, I know your intention is to stop it, but let's just play devil's advocate here. Are you concerned that if this bill does become law, would it create a new template for a Republican fight for the use to become similar to what's happened with critical race theory law, for example?
Well, yes. Look, we tell people, we've been telling people this is not a Jackson problem. This is a Mississippi problem. If they're going to do it to Jackson, they'll do it to Greenville, Greenwood, anywhere they want to go. They want to create a city within a city that just serves a particular segment of the population. This capital city complex has a disproportionate white population, doesn't represent the actual per capita demographic in the city of Jackson. And this is a template for what they'll do in any city that has Black or African American leadership. And so, yes, the danger is that this is the route Republicans will continue to do in places where they lose political power.
Mississippi Democratic Minority Leader Representative Robert Johnson III. Hey, thank you so much for your time and your insight.
Thank you for having me.
So for those, before we go any further, because I want to hear your thoughts from Chrissy and Charles for this. I have to, hold on a second. Where is this? Okay. So I have to correct the correct critical race theory, because like that's been misused, misdefined. The mainstream media does not take time out to give people the correct definition of it, which it's not in regular schools, it's in law school. So critical race theory is a concept, is a sociological rather than biological designation, and that racism pervades society and is fostered and perpetuated by the legal system, used for examining the relationship between race and the laws and legal institutions of a country, and especially the United States. That is the definition of critical race theory, which again is not taught in regular schools. It is a law school study. So from that, I want to hear your thoughts from you, Chrissy and Charles.
Yeah, like I said in my other podcast, I said, fortunately, Florida banned elementary school kids from being taught law school classes. You know, you only have to remain completely irrelevant and bonkers to be a Republican. There's no bottom to how hysterical they are.
And that was a Merriam-Webster definition. So it for those that are listening. So I just wanted to make that clear. Chrissy, this is, and I kind of feel Chrissy's grief too, because Chrissy wants to have kids too. I want her to make me a surrogate grandma. She would make me a surrogate grandma. But, you know, and I see in her face the grief too, because she wants to have kids. But not, in this climate, it's just like,
yeah, the fact that, I mean, like, nowadays people have to explain to their little child, why this person is looking at them like that, or why, because what's going on now is, it, like he was saying, you got to be crazy to stay along the Republican Party. And you notice the ones that are along those lines are the ones that now, since a certain person was in office, they were racist before, but they never acted on it. They could coexist with you. It was never a problem. They didn't talk to you, or the majority of them wouldn't talk to you in any kind of way. And then somebody comes into power and become president and made it okay to now verbalize it and act out on it. So now you have little kids that you have to explain this to because, well, you're brown skinned, you're black. So this is things you're going to have to look out for. You can't even walk down the street no more to the store with a hoodie on because now all of a sudden you're a thug and he feared for his life. So he gets to shoot you and, oh, well, stand your ground laws, all kinds of nonsense like this. And then you have a young white kid going to a whole nother state, shooting up people who are protesting to save our Black lives and get off scotch-free because, oh, well, like it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. They can get away with it, but if we do it, we're gangsters, we're thugs, we're murderers, we're this, we're that. But if they do it, oh, they had a mental health issue or whatever the case may be.
Yep. If a black kid shoots somebody, he doesn't have mental health issues. But a white kid does. Oh, let's find out what happened.
Yep.
He's
let's
a
take him
lone
out
wolf.
peacefully.
He's a lone wolf.
Yeah, let's take him out peacefully. What happened in school? Was he bullied in school?
Yeah,
all this kind of
right.
stuff.
Well, and also
peacefully.
when a black kid is involved, and when a black kid is involved in a crime, say, where are the mother in this? And then when Kyle Rittenhouse crossed the state lines to commit a crime, his mom dropped him off.
Yeah.
No one's saying what the hell happened with her mom, with his mom.
Mom and or where was the dad? Must be from a single mother household. Like that's another thing they blame. Single mothers. No.
It's the system, because just like y'all are saying, like it's so enraging to me, the thought that these moms for liberty are running around the country, going to these school board meetings saying, oh, my white child this, my white child is too young to learn about racism, my white child this, my white child, yes, okay, a child is a child. I have empathy for all children, but what about the Black and brown children? Why are the Black and brown children's feelings not considered with this whitewashed lying history that is force-fed down everybody's throats? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's no concern, but especially the corporate media just keeps focusing on these white parents that are virtual terrorists. These parents are terrorists. Moms for Liberty is a terrorist group. They're one of the few terrorist groups roaming the country free. Let me pull this up here. It's let me see. Okay, so here's another one. Let's watch this one.
Deal. And I was just wondering about, could I put an amendment on that? It would include hanging by a tree also. And also, I would like to sign on to your bill, sir. Thank you.
Lynching's a hate crime, right? You want to bring back lynching people? How racist are you exactly, Paul? It's like 1 to 10. 1 to 10. How racist are you? Stringing people up from trees, Paul? Is that really what you want? You think that's the stuff that's funny to you? You know how offensive that is, man? Do you have any idea how offensive that is? You know how offensive that is to so many people? Do you have any idea, Paul?
This is what we're up against. I mean, this is the nonsense we're up against.
Could you repeat what he said? What was it? I couldn't quite hear the video.
He's the Tennessee legislator that introduced the legislation to bring back legal lynching, regardless of whatever context he meant it in. So later they're saying, okay, so he is part of capital punishment or this and that. Still, he knows the history of lynching in this country. He wanted to bring back legalized lynching. Who are the main people that are going to be on these end of these ropes?
How about we test out the ropes on him first?
You know, who
you know
are
what?
the main people?
But I'd be like, you know what? We could bring it back, but let us test it out on you first. You tell me if the rope is durable enough. Let me hang it in the tree and you go climb from it. And tell me how
That's what a
feel.
number of people were saying. I mean, how ridiculous. Yeah, he with a straight face wanted to bring that. Yeah,
Ridiculous.
I'm gonna play this. Hold on a second. I'm gonna flip this around too. So this is a Tennessee Holler. I follow them on Twitter as well, and they're talking about this too. Tell me if you can hear this or not when I play it, Charles. Just put a thumbs up in the chat box. I'm gonna flip this around and play it.
Comments.
Could I put amendment on that? It would include hanging by a tree also.
He laughed about it yesterday, and then today he apologized.
Suspends common sense to believe that he did not understand what he was saying and the historical context in a state like Tennessee. Ida B. Wells had her newspaper burned down, had to be a refugee from the state of Tennessee because of a crusade to expose lynching. These comments are not coming out of thin air. There is an intent behind them. I had to apologize, but there are a lot of Black people in that state for whom those remarks were tremendously hurtful. All of these things happened in our history. Now, we can learn about them, have the proper context for the society that we have, and actually try to build a better nation because learn from the past. But whether we pretend they happened or not, they are shaping our society, the way that people are choosing to govern when they get to power. None of the other Western democracies have a death penalty. We're the only one. And that is also a legacy of slavery and anti-Blackness, firing squads, things that when we see them in other countries, we know how to call them out for what they are, but we accept them because the United States does those things. The biggest narrative of the 1619 Project is that by understanding that history, we can actually try to build the society that we think we already are, that we actually could be a great nation, and that any great nation can actually withstand the scrutiny of its past. So when I saw those remarks, they literally made my stomach hurt. My dad is from Mississippi, the lynching estate in America, the county that lynched more Black people than any other county in America. And this is not the history of Black people. This is the history of white people as much as it is the history of Black people. And this is the history of America. And we just have to get to a point where we can grapple honestly with it.
Wasn't really that long ago.
People were still being lynched in this country in the 1960s and 70s. Some would argue that what we witnessed with George Floyd was a lynching. I mean, I have argued as much.
I'm in Tennessee. That legislature was from Tennessee. So
he knew what he knew what he was saying, and it's a wink and a nod to his base. He's gonna be. It was like it was like when the whole Trump thing started. Well before he was elected, but where he would say these outrageous things of like what Chrissy was saying suddenly became okay. And all these people came out of the woodwork. Hey, he talks the way my racist ass community and I talk to each other, out in public, in the workplace, in the locker room. This is how we talk in our families, And so when that guy says, oh, let's include that, his constituency, his base is like, yes. And like Chrissy was saying, it's broken now, right? You can't put the tube back in the toothpaste. It's okay now to say those things, and it took centuries for it to not be okay. For all of American history, this was standard in writing. I mean, just take a look at how people wrote about Black people for almost our entire history. the kinds of things and assumptions that are clear from what's being spoken, written, etc. And it took so long for that finally to be taboo and not okay. And it's all reversed in just a matter of years, where now you're right back to square one, and how quickly we revert to that ugliness. It's truly embarrassing. And also, Sharron, I sent you a video, a TikTok on your Messenger in Facebook. So that kind of segues back to our last conversation about how, with Kyle written, it's okay when white people do it, but it's not okay when black people do it. I'll be honest. I've heard most of all the arguments. This video here really is one of the most novel arguments I've heard in a very long time, and it really perfectly encapsulates a lot of what I've been trying to say about the grotesque and absurd double standard that we have between black and white. Same activity and different consequences.
Okay, I'm going to play that video because I actually do. This guy, I saw this video, I think it was last year, sometime early last year. But yeah, I'm going to play this video because he nailed it here.
Threats are white gangs, you just haven't noticed because they aren't criminalized. There's initiation rituals. There's supposed to be a code of silence. You're not allowed to snitch on your brothers. They even got little handshakes, and frats will beef with other frats, literally get into physical altercation, jump and fight other frats. There's just as many drugs moving across college campuses in America as there are in our inner cities. The majority of the way that drugs are being distributed are through frats. There are frat boys making $100,000 off cocaine and Molly, and it isn't a secret. Everyone knows it. We joke about it in all of our movies, and police turn a blind eye to it. They get away with hazings, deaths, selling drugs, and sexual assault. Instead of frat boy being charged with RICO and the DEA raiding frat houses, they just go, and chalk it up to kids will be kids. A group of predominantly white youth committing organized crime is seen as like a part of growing up. After that, they get to graduate college and go on to regular lives. You cannot tell me that's not white privilege.
And that goes...
Yeah,
they grow up to be these legislators. Yeah,
absolutely.
They grow up to be these legislators.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sharron, I sent you a video.
Okay.
I've sent you a video that kind of plays on that too. Like just that first little thing. If you play that.
Okay. Let me okay, hold on a second. I'm going to flip this.
Baseball.
Baseball over Black History Month?
Baseball.
Why are you choosing that? What about black people?
Because I don't like black people.
Damn, bro, it's Black History Month, bro.
Well, it's not my God told me to say that.
Black History Month or baseball?
Baseball.
Baseball.
So I noticed that the other little kid was back there in the background yelling "Meemaw, Meemaw."
But you see,
right?
And then the kid has the nerve to say it's not my fault. God told me to say that.
He got that from home.
Exactly.
He got that from home.
And his church. And
church.
It actually is his religion, I would argue. Now, you would say, well, that doesn't vibe with Jesus's teachings. Yeah, it sure doesn't. But it vibes with white Christian Protestantism in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Let's take a look at, okay, let me put it to you like this. During that election, 2016, during the primaries, you had that idiot, what's his name? Cruz, saying, I'm the overtly, explicitly named evangelical candidate. Where are my evangelicals voting for me? You look at like Liberty University, that Christian Bazaar, 91% of them voted for Trump. A divorcee, crude, not overtly Christian. They had
Racist.
an overtly evangelical. So, in other words, they properly understood their form of white Christian, white supremacist Christianity. Okay, this is prosperity Jesus. This is not the Jesus of sacrifice, the Jesus of the poor, the widowed, the prostitutes, the lepers. This is the prosperity, the fake white Jesus. Okay, this is not black Jesus, right? Not the
Right.
historical Jesus. Okay, and so I love it because kids are so honest. You know, he said God told me to hate black people. You know, it's not an accident that the KKK was a very explicitly Christian organization, which is why they hated Jews so much. Okay, they were the white knights. They were what kind of knights? What were knights? Knights were by definition Christian.
Yeah.
That's what
From
knights
the
are.
Crusades.
Yes.
From the Crusades.
Knights were, if you look at, for example, the most famous, the Teutonic Order of Knights, which later led to Prussia, which later led to the German Empire, which later led to Nazis. The Teutonic Order was specifically created in where? Königsberg, today Kaliningrad. If you guys look, there's that little isolated chunk of Russia right above Belarus, right next to Ukraine. People wonder, why is there a little tiny chunk of Russia where part of the invasion of Ukraine came from? It's because that used to be part of the Teutonic Order of Knights. That's where Prussia was founded. That's where the German state was founded, way the hell out in Russia. Why? Because the Teutonic Order of Knights was created as a crusade. We think crusades only went into Arab and Muslim territories. It also went northwards into the Baltic states, where they were the last holdouts of pagans in Europe. And so they invaded that whole area. So, you know, the crusades go way back, and it always had to do with knights, and it always had to do with Christianity. Not any kind of Christianity you or I would recognize from the teachings of Jesus, but the way in which white supremacist Europeans understood it. It's a violence. It's of basically. Yeah, it's of violence. It's of conquering. It's of genocide, destruction, bloodlust, and a kind of orgiastic violence. And I have a theory as well that I believe the U.S. Army also has a strange death cult that they teach. Because if you look at the School of the Americas in Fort Benning, Georgia, when our trainees graduate from there and go back to Nicaragua or Mexico or whatever, the first thing they do is very bizarre sexualized displays of violence, where they cut women's wombs out of their face and pin it to their face, and you know, all kinds of grotesque things. I think that they teach us kind of an orgiastic violence. And I think it's a part of the core of white supremacist America, which, you know, again, came here from that crusading European culture. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm just going on a major.
Well, and that's why a lot of those, that not to mention Fox News being played all over American bases. Also, those ex-soldiers come out and become police officers.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not so much vets that become police officers. During the Iraq War, there was a very ugly period where police officers were deliberately joining the reserves, right? And they would deliberately go to Iraq to get kill counts. And the regular army was starting to get really annoyed and scared of reservists, because there were a bunch of civilian cops that specifically went to Iraq to rack up a body count. And they were out there literally committing war crimes by just randomly shooting civilians and stuff. I mean, they were there for a bloodlust. So again, yeah, I think there's some very disturbing, bizarre kind of sexualized violence within the core of white supremacist society. And I think that helps us to understand where all this hate comes from. Right. I'm always digging deeper, obviously, because it gets so confusing when you look at all these disparate, seemingly disconnected, and very clumsy attempts, not thinly veiled racism, not thinly veiled bigotry, just in your face, ugly, nasty, incoherent, irrational, but it works, and it brings them together because it all has core values that speaks to the people. And how do you speak to a people who don't really listen? They're not people who gather information. They're the last part of the population that's ever going to get any kind of public message, right? Because they're deeply anti-intellectual. They watch sports, sit around scratching themselves and grunting. Okay, these are people who almost never speak in complete sentences, right? These are people who are functionally illiterate. And by functionally illiterate, we mean they technically know how to read, but they don't ever actually read. How do you reach this public? By appealing to their core values, which is one of violence, bigotry, hate, fear, paranoia, and hysteria. It's that reptilian brain. And I think that's why it's so easy to organize on the right, because you just have to say something like this guy with hang them from a tree. It just right away it works. What are Mexicans or rapists? It's such good marketing for them. Right. Whereas on the left, you have to have pages and pages of explanation, and you're still going to have disagreement. That's why they say organizing on the left is like organizing cats. Yeah, we don't have a pack mentality on the left, right? Whereas over there, all you need is a dog whistle, and they're on it. It's
so
a
what would you
fundamentally different
recommend?
animal.
What would you recommend how we could try to get organized, or like put something out there where we could try to start getting organized? Like, because we got to do something.
I think we have to organize at an extremely local level. I think we need to connect with people on a human basis. Here's what's up. Take any one of these people I'm talking about, right? These ultra racist white bread. Go ahead and have them have a black neighbor and a black coworker. They don't have a problem with them. It doesn't occur to them to be horrible, because they know how to connect with other people on a human basis. But they've just been sequestered into ultra segregated churches, neighborhoods, schools, etc. And they don't come across other people. But when you engage with them on a human level of compassion and conversation and genuine, heartfelt dialogue, then it functions. It disappears. So you think of like back when you had like integrated factories. You had labor unions that were black and white. They were friends. They went to each other's party. It was no big deal. It didn't become an issue. It wasn't a problem, because you're just living your life. And I think that's why I think we can only organize at a very, very local level and create an extremely strong backbone that's resilient to these larger things, and eventually it'll break it down. Sadly, that's exactly what the right did. They organized on a very tiny level. They're right up in your house. It's in the churches, it's in the families, it's in the family culture, it's in the local neighborhoods, it's in the school board. So they're deeply organized, so that it's very easy to get them organized on a national level, because they're already they're prepackaged, ready to go. Hey, we've got something that's anti-black, anti-Jewish, anti-liberal.
I think that they used the template of the Tea Party, so that was already their foundation. That Tea Party foundation.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the Tea Party and all those on all the right, they took their organizing principles from the left, from the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement. Yeah.
So on our side, though, okay, just say hypothetically you were going to start organizing. Who would we use like as our because the left has money as well. The right is very, very, very well funded, so they have also a lot of money behind them. So on our side,
right now Democrats are outfunding the Republicans, and that's because the political spectrum has shifted so far to the right that right now the Democratic Party's core are working professionals, doctors, lawyers, etc. That used to be the core of the Republican Party. Okay, so that's why the Democratic Party is so what we call centrist, which is technically very right wing, and then the Republican Party's core now are
Not
psychopaths, serial killers, racists. I mean, pedophiles. I mean, just psychotic people that are totally unhinged, religious nut jobs, delusional people, white supremacists. So yeah, so that's why, yeah, you when you're saying the left has a lot of money, no, we don't. Not the true left. It's the centrist.
mm,
The doctors, the lawyers, the
the
bankers.
corporate Dems,
Yeah,
the
the
corporate
corporate
Dems.
sector is the Democratic
Hmm.
Party, which
Hmm.
I'm sorry is not liberal, and they do not want change. And
Right,
it's very convenient for them say, hey, vote for us. You don't want these hillbillies and these rednecks and
right,
these white supremacists, do you? We live in the big city. We we live in a diverse neighborhood, et cetera, which is also not true. But anyway, you can pretend.
right. Okay, so knowing that, then, if we were to still go forward with like organizing or getting some kind of grassroots organizing going on, how would you suggest us to do that? Or, would you, since we know that the corporate Dems aren't going to, do anything, so
Yeah,
how would
well,
you
like I said,
suggest to start?
I think the only answer is that we have to organize on a very small level, our own neighborhoods, and it has to be relevant, meaning you have to bring value. You can't organize people around something that doesn't do something for them. Racism
Right.
does something for you. It serves a purpose, it has a goal, and it has positive effects. Right? When I invest my time into white supremacy, I get a huge payback. Okay? I get a very, very good return on investment. Okay? I get to have my schools be white. I get to have police protect me from black people. Just everything that our society currently is, right? People say the system is broken. It's working
Mm,
fine.
right.
Our police shoot black people dead in the streets over nothing. The system is working the way it was designed, the way it's worked for centuries. Okay. So they have a great return on investment, right? Join us and you're going to get what you want. Your white blonde daughter won't date that black hip hop artist, okay, or that basketball guy. That's not going to happen. We're going to protect you from that, right? So they get something for it. What are we offering, right? We're not offering an alternative of something that you could put in your pocket,
Hmm.
right? So again, I think that's why we have to organize in a way that adds actual real value. And it's
Yep.
inherently a lot harder because we're not offering violence. Violence is easy and it works. It's
Hmm.
very effective. It has a very low shelf life in terms of the long term because it's always very fragile and it always requires more and more and more violence. But we have very long shelf life, but it doesn't have a good effect early on. So what we have to add is soul value,
Hmm.
um, good, clean, effective, locally grown food, arts, music, culture. Okay, that's what we have to offer. Support, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, right? So all the stuff that we do on the left, whether it's meditation, massage, whether it's arts, music, culture, theater, whether it's even political activism, whether it's tai chi, all the many things that we do on the left, we add actual real value. But it's harder to get us together because we're so spread out. But not in terms of numbers, sheer numbers, we have as many numbers as the crazies on the right. So, but they're highly unified. We're deeply fragmented.
Hmm.
Take a look at how centrist Republican conservatives, how well they protect their neo-Nazis. They're very loyal to each other. They will not throw each other under the bus. You will never hear a very moderate centrist Republican saying those fucking militia members who want to
Because the
start
militia
a race
helped them
war.
out. The militia helped them.
Yeah, it helps them, but again, it kind of doesn't, because it makes them look really bad, but they know they share the same DNA, and they're just very loyal to each other because they feel they feel that bond of similarity. They feel some level of allegiance to each other. And on the left, what is it? I think it was Che Guevara that said the problem with the left is that we arrange our firing squads in a circle, and it's true. We just tear each other down. You're not left enough. You're not radical enough. You're not You're not trans friendly enough. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't be trans friendly, but let's have a conversation about the ways in which we're not trans friendly. Let's not cancel each other outright. Now, you cancel someone who's belligerent. Okay, fine. I don't have a problem with canceling people who are just outrageous. But if you have a fellow ally on the left and they aren't quite up to speed, pull them aside and have a conversation. Don't accuse. Don't dismiss. Don't act with disdain or disgust. That's what the right does. We work with compassion and love and empathy and say, hey, I understand where you're coming from. I was like that once, but here's what moved me. When I was able to start to see trans people as human too, that everyone is God's children, and that when I studied biology, I found that this is common across all animals. Okay, and that gender is extremely fluid. And if we there's 19 different kinds of biological sex, and for us to only have 2 genders is preposterous. Okay, so anyway, I went on yet another rant. I'm sorry. You can come back now, Chrissy.
Where'd she go?
I scared her off.
There she is. What are your thoughts, Chrissy?
It's a lot.
Close out. You're gonna close this out.
No, don't do that. Do not do that. I am not the one to close it out.
Okay, how would you okay, like speaking from your generation, what do you want to see done with the Democrats and the organization?
I mean, honestly, I feel like it's at a point where they need to play the game that the Republicans are playing. Like, they go in there and they want to executive order this, executive order that, when the rest of the House and the Senate is not on their side, so they want to executive order. Start playing that game then. If you have to executive order and over some bills that they won't pass, then so be it. That's the game they play. Show them you can play it too. Because it's not like the laws and bills that you are trying to put through are malicious. These are legit laws and bills that you're trying to put through for the betterment of the people. Like, for example, like with the gun control and different things like that, like things that you're trying to put in for the betterment of the people, and they don't want that. So, and they have the majority, so they're not going to let it through. And then you just say, okay, fine. No, you know what? Say, listen, I'm the president. And at the end of the day, this one is going through. That's what the other one did at some points. You just need to do that too.
And technically all the presidents have. So, but like you were saying, if it's for the betterment of something and not something like that's just going to benefit the 1%, with the like tax rates and stuff like that.
Yeah, let's remember that Obama did do an executive order to ban flammable liquids through densely populated areas, and Trump reversed it, and that's how we ended up with Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And then he turns around and blames the current president. Like, that's why Biden had to say, no, you're the one that undid it. We had something in place. You undid it because you didn't want it there for your pockets.
Not just that, just out of spite as well. Because as soon as he got installed in the White House, he went to work undoing as much as he could. Everything that President Obama had in, he did that just out of spite because he could not
That too, yeah.
stand that black man. Just jealousy and
it's just so funny how everything with him was a double standard. You know, oh, he's from Hawaii. Oh, his father's African. Oh, let me see the birth certificate. Let me see this. Let me see that. And everything was provided. No hesitation, no nothing. Now it comes to you. Where's your taxes? Where's your this? Where's your that? Oh, I don't need to. Like, okay. All right.
And that's how we end up with this what's his name up there in New York? Santos. I mean, he just point blank said. Now he's just like, yeah, I've lied about everything. So what? I'm not going nowhere. I'm not going to leave office. I'm not going to resign or nothing. Yes, I'm a liar. Yes, I'm a cross-dresser. Yes, I'm this. Yes, I'm gay. Yes, I'm. I lied about everything. So what? I'm gonna stay put. Like, that's how we ended up with him. And now the likes of DeSantis down there in Florida and this other stuff, these people here in Tennessee, that's why they're trying to rush through all these barbaric legislations, because they're just basically like, okay, well, nobody's gonna stop us. We're just gonna keep going. So we're going to end this show, this really, really good, informative show. We're going to keep talking about this, and we're going to come back tomorrow. My friends Chrissy, thank you. My friend Charles, thank you. Thank you, co-hosts.
You're welcome.
This is a great show.
Thanks for having us.
Yay! And we will see you listeners, or talk to you listeners later. Thank you. Bye.